All right, moving on to the sort of surprising news that came out of Boston today, where Danny Ainge, general manager, he is retiring, and Brad Stevens, the head coach, who we've kind of questioned the future of him on this program. Well, he's been promoted to general manager, and so now the Celtics, as they head to their offseason after being eliminated by the Brooklyn Nets in 5 games in the first round, well, they're looking for a new head coach. Drink. First of all, were you surprised by this news, and where do you see the Celtics going from here?
Listen, first of all, I was absolutely flabbergasted by the news, not just surprised. I was surprised not because I don't think Brad Stevens deserved a job or anything. It's just, hey, if you've been listening to the show, you know how I've been feeling about Brad Stevens' future. I thought he was out of here. I thought he was gonna get fired and he was gonna find another team to coach. I don't necessarily think it's a bad move by Boston though. Danny Ainge, yeah, you let a lot of guys come, to that line and you didn't quite sign them, and a lot of people felt like Danny Ainge, as good as he was at accumulating these picks, he didn't really use them to the max of his ability. And this year kind of showed it. You got to think, this was a year where you could have had a James Harden to help you. You could have had, I would say Anthony Davis, but that'd just be hilarious at this point. But you could have had like some of those other stars to come in and help when Jaylen Brown went down or whatever. Even if Jaylen Brown was still on the team, you just could have had better opportunities to get to the overall goal, and that's win the championship. And you didn't do it. You just, I'm leaving the table. You want too much. You want too much. So maybe it was time for Danny Ainge to retire. Now, the interesting part of bringing in Brad Stevens, I like it. I do. One of my biggest knocks on Brad Stevens is this. He wasn't good at coaching superstars. And not all coaches are. That's fine. But what I think he is good at is getting the most out of the average star. Or saying A player can play with B player very well. So if I can get these two players to be on the same accord, we got something going. C player don't like D player, so I might go ahead and get, C on out of here. And then let me get a second round pick for him or something. I think he can do that very well, and that is what's required in the position that he's going to. And listen, we got to remember this: Brad Stevens just coached all these dudes. So you best to know when he gets up there, he gonna know who he want to keep and who he don't want to keep. Kimball Walker, you might be on the block, but I like that the front office said, you know what? Instead of keep hiring the guys we've been dealing with time after time, let's get some new young blood in here. So you go with Brad Stevens. I told you, I think the way he looks like he's like very good with numbers. He looks like he's very good with the small nuances of things, very analytic. I think it's a good move to keep it short. And we will find out very soon how good of a move it is. Now, my question is, at the end of the day, now who do you get to replace Brad Stevens? Because I think you took care of the easy part. That was easy to put Brad Stevens in and replace Danny Ainge. Now you got to find the guy that's going to take Brad Stevens' job. And like you have mentioned to me, I've been like, Brad Stevens is going to be gone, he's going to be gone, he's going to be gone. And you always ask me the same question. Who would you replace him with if he leaves? Now we're about to find out. So I think this is the hard part for Brooklyn. But at the end of the day, I think it's a good move. I think Brad Stevens is going to be able to handle the job. I think Boston is going to be a better team in the future for it because, like I said, now Brad Stevens can probably use some of these picks that Danny Ainge just like to hoard for whatever reason and go get a player that, he might not be able to coach, but he might be able to work with in the GM capacity. Because if you hire Jason Kidd, he's good with superstars. We've seen him with Giannis. I think he can make it happen. And I don't know about Lloyd Pierce, but listen, dude was a head coach. He got fired kind of quick, but it's something there. It got to be something there if they're bringing his name back up. But I'm just going to say this. If Boston is as racist as Kyrie said they are, hey, Lord, you might want to think about it before you go out there. But Jason Kidd kind of light skinned, so he might get away with it. But you, I don't know, bro. You might want to think about it. So I'm just throwing it out there, just poking fun at the Kyrie situation. But at the end of the day, like I said, man, I think it's a good move for Boston. Now let's sit back and see who they hire as head coach.
Yeah, to that point, this is something I should have mentioned in the last segment, but since brought, a little tone of the racist conversation that we have from time to time, and I don't know how accurate this is, but the data I'm looking at from Boston from this is from 4 years ago, but I wouldn't imagine it's changed a whole lot. That's a liberal place, Boston. And what you have here is Democratic voters outnumber Republican voters about 8-1. So I know we get caught up in this whole narrative that it's the nasty Walmart shopping Republican voters who they're the racist and all that. Judging by that, it'd be hard to prove that point right there with that voting ratio. I'll just throw that out there. But in regards to Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens and what we saw today, I don't know. I don't know if I could come up with a segment that we've talked about to where I've been more surprised and absolutely did not see this coming. Can you think of one off the top of your head?
Billy Donovan getting let go by OKC, maybe. But this bigger than that. It's a football one that I had in my brain, but no, I can't.
And maybe there are similar ones to where like Billy Donovan's a good example, but I mean, not only the guy you had Brad Stevens, you thought he would lose his job. I thought he would under most circumstances he'd be retained, but I don't think nobody had promotion. Nobody had promotion. And that's where that kind of it makes me scratch my head a little bit. I think it has a chance to work, but I'd say in Danny Ainge's defense, much like I said, look, Brad Stevens had a down year, the Celtics had a down year. I think Danny Ainge had a down year. I've been fairly critical of him since the trade deadline. I don't think they did a particularly good job. We know that, and we know late in the season, Jaylen Brown gets hurt, and then Kemba Walker and Robert Williams, they run into their own troubles. So they didn't really have much of a chance. Jason Tatum did everything he could for him, but just not enough. But much like I thought Brad Stevens, I'm not going to let a guy with this successful track record. He hasn't reached the ultimate goal, hasn't won a finals, hasn't made it to a final. But you do have 2 Eastern Conference Finals appearances. And Danny Ainge, I know he has, and that's a great point to why they've been hoarding picks since they fleeced the Nets in that Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett trade. They got all the picks. And they've had opportunities to get superstars, and they've never pulled the trigger on them. You got to wonder about that now, because now Brooklyn's ahead of them. Brooklyn just beat them up, and it kind of brings into question. I'm not going to say, oh well, Sean Marks, he's the gold standard for GMs now. I think some of it's just they were in a fortunate situation to where the Knicks are kind of like, nobody's sure about James Dolan and how they recycle coaches, and you got frickin' Frack out there at the press conference. They don't know what's happening. So, Brooklyn's in New York. The Knicks, who are normally, they're the top ticket in town. They can't get it together. So now you have a situation where Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, they see this and they're like, oh, New York, that's a circus up there. We going to Brooklyn. Brooklyn got a little lucky. They landed 2 superstars, in free agency. They hit big, and then Boston over here, they just over here kind of just biding their time, and they done.
My bad. And I was gonna say, keep in mind the same thing that people were saying about James Harden going to Brooklyn. They said the same thing about him going to Boston. Oh, if you get him, you got to get rid of all your talent, and I don't know if he's gonna be worth it Only difference is Brooklyn said, whatever, we still want him, and Boston said, too rich for our blood.
Yeah, and I think to Boston's credit, they've built something that's really good. They got two building blocks in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They got two building blocks. And I also think Marcus Smart, he's another building block. Robert Williams, he's something that I think we can look forward to down the line. We don't know about Kemba Walker. I'm not gonna be up here and defend Evan Fournier probably about ever. But so that becomes a challenge. Like, how do you fill out the team around them? And I'm gonna tell you some of the things some of the things they've done lately with their roster, they haven't gotten better. They're younger. They're a pretty young team, but they're gonna have to figure out like almost similar to kind of like the position we've talked about with Golden State. Like Golden State's got to figure out the depth. They got to figure out like who's gonna be. Do we want? What about Oubre and Wiggins? Kind of same thing with Boston. What about Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier? And what about who are the young guys that are kind of develop and fill out that bench? That's kind of where they are. And Brad Stevens now, it's just curious. I don't know if I've ever seen something like this to where we go from a coach who we have legitimate questions, and I know especially you've had legitimate questions about whether Brad Stevens should keep his job because of how he hasn't had a good year. When you evaluate Brad Stevens as a head coach this year, I think it's absolutely fair to say he is disappointed on every level. When you make an Eastern Conference Finals, and then you go from that to a 500 team who just never got it together at all, and you get gentlemen swept in the first round, that's a disappointment in every way, even though we understand we got injuries and all that. I can't imagine. I've never seen a guy get a promotion off that. So, he's gonna be. We gotta look at him with, I think, just as much scrutiny now that he's been elevated to another role. Is it something he can do? Perhaps he can, but we have to move now from the X's and O's and all that to how does Brad Stevens evaluate talent, and what is he going to do with the draft picks and all that. So I'm fascinated to see what happens next. Lloyd Pierce, Jason Kidd, I think those are names we've seen, but I'm sure there's someone else that we haven't thought of that may get a look at this. But definitely something worth watching.